Wanna buy a new car, but the price ain't right. Ain't that cold? Be a downside cheaper, yes it would. Start riding a bike. Listen, they're making milk out of powder. Yeah, they are. Got the babies crying. Poor baby, they know what that stuff is. Rent's gone up higher. Yes, it is. Got the parents lying. I'll pay you tomorrow. Lord, it's a real motherfucker, yeah. Make you wanna run for cover. Yes, it will. And if you look, you will discover, yeah. Lord, it's a real motherfucker, yeah. Ow! Good God. Listen, got to go to a disco. Throw your troubles away. Dance to the music, yeah, that the DJ play. Well, alright. And then the lights come on, yeah, like you knew they would. Ain't that cold? Gone home and face the music that don't sound too good. Ain't that cold? Listen, Lord, it's a real motherfucker. It'll make you wanna run for cover, yeah. And if you look, you will discover, yeah. Lord, it's a real motherfucker, yeah. Oh! Yes, it will. And if you look, you will discover, yeah. Lord, it's a real motherfucker, yeah. Say it's a real motherfucker, yeah. Oh, get out of here! My goodness. Too cold. Cold-blooded, cold-blooded. Telling you the truth. Let me stop here at this gas station. Give me 3 gallons of low lead. I'm full, nothing else.
Aquaba, greetings, Bom Tarde. Welcome, happy Sunday. Sorry for the technical delays with the start, but we are here and ready for action. Thank you for joining us for this 156th episode of Our Ancestors' Voices, a program sponsored each Sunday at the same time every week by the All African People's Revolutionary Party. We're thankful for you for joining us and spending this time today on this very important topic, May Day and African Liberation Day. We're going to be talking about the historically significant concept of May Day, the International Day of the Worker, class consciousness and creating a class conscious movement, and what we need to do to unite that wonderful concept with the equally wonderful concept of anti-colonialism and African self-determination represented by African Liberation Day. So both of these institutions, May Day, African Liberation Day, what are they about? And how can we use both of them to strengthen our struggle? That's the topic for today. So we're glad that you're able to join us for that. We give thanks to the indigenous people of the Western Hemisphere, the true caretakers of this land. We acknowledge them and give respect to them. And we acknowledge our African ancestors, who are the only reason why we continue to breathe air and exist anywhere we are on the planet Earth. And we're so thankful for them. And we desire nothing except their patience with us while we figure out how to make a continued contribution from the wonderful legacy that they have given us. So we get started with our usual introductions. Our Ancestors' Voices, again, is a program sponsored each week by the All African People's Revolutionary Party, the AAPRP. The APRP is a revolutionary, independent, mass, Pan-African political party, which is based in Africa. Our objective is Pan-Africanism, which we define correctly as one unified socialist Africa, Pan-Africanism. And our methodology for achieving Pan-Africanism, comes directly from Kwame Nkrumah's Handbook of Revolutionary Warfare. You see the picture on the screen. If you're looking at a picture, hopefully you are, and you see that. And in that book, Nkrumah lays out the strategy to achieve one unified socialist Africa. Pan-Africanism is about uniting all of the revolutionary Pan-African formations on the ground throughout Africa, the national home for all people of African descent, scattered and suffering in 120 countries worldwide. And Our Ancestors' Voices is hosted each week by myself, Ajamu, and my daughter, biologically and ideologically, Shakura. We're both active within the All African People's Revolutionary Party. So we are glad you're joining us today for this topic, May Day and African Liberation Day, both which occur in the month of May every year. May Day is May 1st. We just experienced that last week. And African Liberation Day is May 25th. So we're going to talk about how we use those two wonderful institutions and how, especially us as African people, we unite them to make our movement for Pan-Africanism stronger. So to get us started, I turn it over to Shakura.
Thank you, kind sir. Appreciate that. Greetings, everyone. We hope you are well. Happy belated May Day and happy early African Liberation Day. So I'm so excited to talk about May Day because I always think that people are celebrating institutions that really should not be celebrated. And then the institutions that we really need to celebrate and acknowledge are the ones that we really are ignorant and don't know about, or maybe we choose not to know about, or however that applies to you. And so hopefully with the next, 54 something odd minutes that we have left, you can take enough information to take it and develop it and enhance your political education by doing more research around these topics and these institutions that we're going to talk about today. But these are definitely some holiday institutions that I was raised on in terms of celebrating as a young child. And I'm very happy to still be able to celebrate them now because they're a huge part of who we are as a people, yes, but also who we are as a collective to build up a one unified socialist Africa. In doing that, we need to figure out how to acknowledge the very present and very obvious class struggle that exists in the world around us, because this is precisely what we are trying to eradicate when we achieve one unified socialist Africa, meaning we're starting off as a socialist continent, but we aim to move into communism. And so what better way to do that than to eradicate this class divide that we have between us? And as I said, with May Day and with African Liberation Day, both of those celebrate this ideology where classism is really not something that we need to continue fostering and promoting. Before I get started with the slide, I do want to ask and remind, or ask for the first time if you have not been listening to previous seminars, we are celebrating African Liberation Day this month, and we have so many events that are taking place both virtually and in person. Please, please, please donate to our cause, because this particular event is literally a global institution where we are having people from numerous countries on the continent. We have numerous numerous organization and work study circles in parts of the Americas, as well as in Canada. We have folks in parts of Europe that are celebrating African Liberation Day. I've mentioned to you numerous times, we have speaking fees. There are speakers that we need to pay for, some to travel, but also to speak, honorariums. We have awards that need to be printed out. Some of them need to be mailed internationally, if not emailed, but still the ink and the printing cost, okay, to get these awards made. So we do ask for your support in helping us to raise money for ALD. Please, please, please donate to www.abetterworld.me. Again, we ask that you donate to www.abetterworld.me. ALD is this month, and we will continue to ask for your donations. So if you've already donated, please consider donating again. And if you have not already donated, please do so. If you've donated numerous times, please ask your friends to donate. Just as you would if you, witnessed the story on the news of somebody who was almost killed in a drive-by shooting, and they set up a GoFundMe account. Well, there's nothing wrong with that, but we still live in a system that's very individualized. And so the focus would be on the victim of that accident, right? Well, in this case, we're asking you to donate your money to a cause that's going to advance every single person of African descent, but it's also going to advance Palestinian people. It's also going to advance Asian descent people. It's going to advance indigenous people. This particular institution affects everyone around the world, because if Africa becomes free, that's going to make it a lot harder for Europe to colonize other places. And if we become free, then we're going to do everything we can to make sure the indigenous people become free and get their land back. And then the indigenous people and the Africans are going to do everything they can to help the Palestinians and the indigenous and the Africans, so on and so forth. We're going to be working until we have our Asian comrades who are free and they have access to their land, and our Irish folks are free and they have access to their land. So the point I'm making to you is, it doesn't just start with us and end with us. We definitely need our land back, but we also are very clear that our struggle is one that is shared with other colonized peoples as well. And so again, if it's a win for them, it's a win for us, and it's a win for us, it's a win for them. And so we ask that you donate for ALD for that purpose. Again, www.abetterworld.me. So what is May Day? May Day is such an awesome institution, you all. And if you don't already celebrate it, you should strongly consider marking your calendar for May 1st, from now until the rest of your eternity on this planet, because it's the one true institution where you as a person, especially if you are a working class person, you get to actually elevate yourself and allow your organization or your institution where you work, you're allowing them to help you understand and to help them understand that you understand that even though you may not have resources and you may not have power and be able to determine and decipher how things happen, you understand that on a long scale, they need you more than you need them. And in doing that, then we can have more of a position to advocate as workers for what it is that we need. Maybe it's livable wages. Maybe it's helping them understand that we have a right to ask for health insurance, and we have a right to demand it. We have a right to strike for it. We have a right to make sure that we have suitable working conditions. So safety precautions are taking place. We don't want to walk into a building and the electricity is faulty with sparks flying all over the place. We don't want to walk into a building that's condemned and there's no running water, right? We want to make sure that everyone who is in that building can safely get up the stairs or take the elevator, however they need to, so that they can do what they need to do. We want to make sure that the building has comfort amenities. If you particularly live in a part of the world where it's very warm this time of year, then you don't want to be in a building where the air conditioning is not working. If that's something that benefits you and if that's a privilege that you have access to, same as if it's the winter time and the heater is not working. And so the thing about May Day is it allows us as workers to remind ourselves, but also our employers, that not only do we matter, but we deserve to work and earn livable wages and work in spaces that are safe and that consider how we bring value to that organization. You know, every single one of us, especially if we have a position that we particularly don't enjoy, every single one of us has experienced that one time or maybe multiple times where our employer has asked us to probably come in earlier but did not want to let us clock the time in, right? Or our employer has asked us to consider taking notes for a meeting, but then didn't want to pay us for the labor of doing the notes because maybe that meeting was off the clock or whatever that looks like. These are all characteristics of capitalism because it's so much easier to exploit the worker than to actually celebrate them. And we know that that has happened numerous times with the indigenous people, with Asian descent people, and even with Africans when we were enslaved. But even beyond that, I don't think we understand that it wasn't just happening during slavery of this exploitation. The idea of exploitation has been around for centuries. It's been around for centuries. And it wasn't just Africans who were being exploited. As I said, it was non-male people. It was femme people who were being exploited. It was differently able people who were being exploited. We have all these different examples of that. I'm sure we had some of our LGBTQ comrades who were being exploited. And so when we think about exploitation, we have to think about how it benefits the employer not to pay us for our time, but to try to squeeze out as much of our time as they can without adequately paying us for our services. This is precisely why most of us work in conditions where we don't make livable wages. This is precisely why. And a couple of seminars ago, my dad gave the example about how you have specific countries that are not prioritizing elderly people at all. And America is one example of that, which is why if our elderly ancestors do not have the means to have a pension or some type of locked in income set up for them when they are working, by the time they retire, then this is why we walk into Burger King and they're behind the counter, 84 years old. This is why when we go to a parent teacher conference event or we go to a school of some type, we see the custodial workers who are clearly in their late 70s, early 80s, who are still vacuuming, who are still cleaning the bathrooms, right? And they unfortunately don't have a way to even determine when they're going to be able to retire because they still need the income. This is why you see them doing paper routes and you see them working at Dollar Tree, or maybe you walk into Kmart or Sears or Target, whatever that may be, and you see them there. That's because that's because there are not systems in place that are designed to help take care of them. And as I just said, if they don't have the privilege to be able to have some type of pension, then they're not going to be able to earn a fixed amount for the rest of their time. And so because of that, they have to still make ends meet. And don't get me started on how a lot of our elderly folks are also still raising children, right? Because their children are doing whatever. So then they're raising the grandchildren. So then they really need income, right? Because children cost a lot of money, right? And so I just think it's important to think about that, to think about how classism and how capitalism make it really hard for people to just be valued as workers. And so this is why May Day exists, because it's up to us to set the tone and to demand that we have some better situations in place. As I said, if we are working in buildings that don't have accessible means, then we need to advocate for that and refuse to work until those things happen. Now, this is why organization matters. This is why collectivism matters. And this is why being able to know, what our power is as a collective, that's why that's so important, because we have a responsibility, not just to ourselves, but to our coworkers, to be able to really come together and help our employers understand this is simply not something we're going to tolerate. Like, we're just not going to tolerate it. And there are the employers have power and they have more. Yes, there are more of them than there are us, because capitalism has a way of focusing that way so that the workers feel like they are minute and they are less than. But there are more workers than there are capitalist entities. And that's why I'm saying, if we all found a way to come together, if we all found a way to organize and unify our needs, our requirements, our demands together, May Day would be so much more of a powerful day. And of course, we shouldn't just organize on May Day, but this could at least be a start. So I challenge you for next year to start getting ready in January for what that looks like, to start figuring out what are some things that you and your coworkers are really interested in having, and you don't have access to that yet. I've shared this example time and time again with you all about how my graduate colleagues, we do not have health insurance on my campus. And so that's a perfect May Day topic. And we've been fighting for the last 4 years that I've been enrolled. We've been fighting and fighting. We have not won yet, but we are not giving up. We literally have buttons that say graduate students deserve healthcare too. And so just thinking of different examples like that, if that's something that you and your coworkers are interested in, May Day is an opportunity for workers to help the employer understand that just because there is a class divide does not mean we deserve to be dehumanized and mistreated. And we understand that if we walk out right now, you will be put in a very bad position. And I always give the example of teaching, for example. If all the teachers just left the school, that would be really difficult for all of these classrooms to now have to figure out how to get replacements, right? Same thing with graduate students. If we all just stopped teaching, that would be really difficult for all these classes to find replacements. And so, just consider yourself and consider your worth and consider how your coworkers and you can come together to figure that out. You don't have to work in miserable conditions. Capitalism is a powerful system, but it is not the end all be all, and it is crumbling. Next slide, please. All right. So with African Liberation Day, it's very similar to May Day, but the one of the bigger differences is we're trying to focus on eradicating eradicating capitalism, yes, but also eradicating classism. And so with ALD, the focus has been and always will be helping Africans everywhere understand that we all belong to the African nation. We can thank Kwame Nkrumah for saying that, because so many of us are so confused in terms of thinking that we are Black, not African, or we think that we are African American, not African, which is such an oxymoron. We're Afro-Cuban, we're American Negro, we're colored, we're all of these things. And so Kwame Nkrumah just helps us understand, no, we all come from Africa. Whether you want to admit it or not, whether it makes you uncomfortable or not, you are in fact African. And so the precise point of interjection of this is that if Africa is under attack and not free, then that means anyone who descends from that continent is also going to be at a disadvantage. And this is why we have neo-colonialists in Africa right now, making it very hard for African people to be respected around the world. As I just said, the continent is not being respected. The land is not being respected. The people who are from the land are not being respected. We were kidnapped. You don't kidnap people that you respect. You kidnap people that you don't see value for. And that's why you sell them as property, because you don't see value for them. And so if we ourselves are having a strong way of trying to understand that, this is why Africa needs to be free, which is literally the premise of African Liberation Day, is helping Africans everywhere have a Pan-African lens so they understand that we are all connected to the continent, whether we want to admit it or not. So we are African and we need to accept that. And B, helping us further understand African Liberation Day is an opportunity to eradicate classism and help us understand that we all have contributions that we can do to do that, which means we don't need to determine how much money someone has as a way of figuring out whether or not we want to respect them, but also helping us to understand that we all have a responsibility to free Mother Africa. Every single one of us has a responsibility, and we all have different skills to be able to do that. Some of us can articulate very well. We can write speeches very well. Some of us have really good media presence and we can manage social media accounts. Some of us are really good at organizing events and we can do that. Some of us are really good at facilitating events. Some of us are really good at speaking at events. The list goes on and on and on and on. But if you are not using your gifts to help save Mother Africa, then you are a disgrace. And it's really, you want to talk about exploitation, as much as she has done for you, you should be ashamed of yourself. especially if you were denouncing her, if you were not admitting that you are in fact African. So I think that I could talk on and on about this, but I'm not, because I need to pass it back to my dad. But I will say, African Liberation Day, I was celebrating ALD before I was even a thought in my parents' eyes. And I am very humbled and grateful that they sacrificed year after year and made it so that I could be there and celebrate that. If I had not been going to all of these ALDs all these years, then I would not have seen the interconnections that I've been describing to you. So I wouldn't have seen the Palestinian speakers there year after year. And I'm sure I probably wondered, this is an African event. Why are Palestinian people here? Well, as an adult, I understand, because their struggle is our struggle. I now understand that just like we would go to Alcatraz to support our indigenous comrades, they were at ALD to support us, and we gave them space to speak. We gave the Irish comrades space to speak. The list goes on and on. My point is, this is all by design, you all. African Liberation Day is specifically targeting African people so that we can understand that Africa is still under attack. And we're not just going to do it because Africans who are on the continent are under attack. Africans everywhere are under attack because Africa is under attack. And the sooner that we do something about that, increasing our political education, joining an organization that is working for justice, and most importantly, no longer denouncing that we are African, accepting it, internalizing it, embodying it, and living it is one of the best ways that we can help free Africa. Admitting that we understand that we have a connection is the best way. Then joining an organization that's working for justice, then increasing political education. All of those things are going to come. I ask you one more time to donate to abetterworld.me so that we can continue African Liberation Day. Again, we're offering virtual and in-person events. I mean, you have so many opportunities to celebrate this beautiful day and to celebrate any colonized person who has been suffering at the hands of colonialization. abetterworld.me, www.abetterworld.me. I hope to see you all at ALD, whether it's virtually or in person. And I also hope to see you at a May Day event this time next year so that we can celebrate eradicating classism and celebrating colonized people getting their land backs and being free. Ashe.
Ashe, obrigada. Thank you, Midasi Shakura. And before I continue, I just want to reiterate your point about African Liberation Day. And I want to thank all of you who have donated towards African Liberation Day 2023. And for those of you that have donated towards the Burkina Faso project, the Thomas Sankara Center for Pan-African Unity, and all of the other APRP connected projects that we've asked you to donate for. We appreciate those of you who have found a way to make that contribution. It's very important. It's very helpful. It's very well noted by people around the world. When I was in Africa in January, people there were very aware of your donations. And so we want to, say that we had a goal. We've been doing this for a few weeks for African Liberation Day 2023. And we had a goal to try to contribute from this program $500 towards the organization of African Liberation Day all over the African continent. We are organizing programs on the ground in Zimbabwe, in Azania, what they call South Africa, in Senegal, in Ghana, in Burkina Faso, in Kenya, and in Guinea-Bissau. And so we need money to do that, obviously. And our humble goal here, as Shakur said, we raise money many different ways, but our humble goal just with this weekly program was to raise at least $500. And we're almost there. We've raised at this point $340 just in the last few weeks, US dollars. And so we just want to ask for at least another $160 that we can contribute towards our organizing of African Liberation Day. So whatever you have, if you can reach in, go to www.abetterworld.me and contribute $160 more. We have about 2 weeks, 2 more programs to raise that, 2 more weeks. So we appreciate all your efforts. Thank you very much on behalf of the struggling African masses. And we will continue on with talking about African Liberation Day and talking about May Day. So we want to just essentially take a moment to talk about what our position is in the All African People's Revolutionary Party on May Day and African Liberation Day. And when we say that, I'm talking specifically about, how we can begin to maximize the production from both of these institutions. These are very important institutions. And we've talked a lot about how oppressed people need institutions, liberation institutions. The capitalist system has plenty of institutions. They have plenty of days that perpetuate their values of money over people, of profit over human beings. They have plenty of days that commemorate that. We have to create our own institutions that combat that backward propaganda and talk about people over profit. So May Day and African Liberation Day are two examples of those types of positive institutions. So we should start by believing that, all working people have the capacity to develop a working class consciousness. We have to believe that. In other words, we can't think that, well, people are reactionary in their thinking, so that's just it. It just ends there. There's no way that they will ever be able to make any type of contribution. This is an elitist mindset, if anyone thinks that way, because none of us were born with revolutionary consciousness out of the womb. All of us had to develop that through people taking time and patience, even if we may not have been aware of them being patient with us, but I assure you that they were very patient with our ignorance and our seeming inability to comprehend basic concepts. And somebody was patient with us, and over time we began to grasp the concepts and begin to develop our consciousness. Well, this is true with everyone. Everybody has the potential to do this, and we have to believe that. And we have to see that the enemy is not people who are unconscious. It's not people who are politically unconscious. That's not the enemy. The enemy is the capitalist and imperialist system. And in the APRP, we say that people that are reactionary, that's our job to make their consciousness revolutionary. And so in order to do that, we talk about how you have to know the difference between someone who is reactionary and someone who's counter-revolutionary, because a lot of times we make the error of thinking that those two are the same thing. Someone that's reactionary is counter-revolutionary, and they are absolutely different. Reactionary means that someone just doesn't have information. They just don't know. And that's the overwhelming majority of the population on Earth, right? Counter-revolutionary is someone who is actively taking a position against the forward progress of our people, against revolution, against the forward progress of our people. Those are two completely different things. So we're saying that the majority of people we're talking about are reactionary. So we have a responsibility to do more work. If you are upset that people don't have political consciousness, that's a signal to you that we got more work to do. That's all that is, because the enemy is the system. It's not the people. And African Liberation Day for us is simply a vehicle for us to get where we need to be. It's a vehicle that we use to inform our people's consciousness about Africa and the role that Africa plays in our lives. Whether we know anything about Africa or not, whether we ever been there, whether we ever plan to go there, it still plays an extremely important role in our life. Now, all one has to do, for a quick example, what I'm talking about, is look at the history of this backward empire. This backward empire, I'm talking about the United Snakes of America, has killed more people than any government in the history of human civilization. This government has killed millions of people. It's used its technology not to solve the problems in the world like hunger and healthcare disparities. It's used this technology primarily to kill and plunder the planet Earth and to kill millions of people. That's what it's done. And that's what it continues to do. And so we have to think about it in the context of, what if we had a situation where African people, or we're just saying, talking about African Liberation Day, as a vehicle, what if there was a situation, if you understand the history of this country and you know how backward it is, you know how they don't value life, human life, especially not African life. What if there was no Africa? And this is for the people that say, well, Africa doesn't do anything for us. What if there was no Africa in the world today? It was just 50 million of us here in the United States. If you understand the nature of this beast, this empire, they would have wiped us out years ago. They would have wiped us out years ago if it was just us. And then by the same token, just to understand the relationship that we have to one another, if there were not 50 million Africans in the US, they would have ran roughshod through Africa and just taken everything with just a colonial approach. The Europeans would have been there today, still stealing everything. The reason why that has not happened the way I just described is because the enemies of humanity, the capitalist and imperialist system, they know that if they were to engage in out and out warfare against the African masses here in the US, they would have a problem with African people everywhere on earth. And they also know that if they were to out and out start bombing roughshod all over Africa, then they would have a problem with the 50 million Africans in the US. They already experienced that because in World War II, during that period, when Italy invaded Ethiopia, Africans went into urban rebellions all over this country. Unconscious Africans. Africans don't know, I ain't no African. We're tearing up the country because Italy invaded Ethiopia. People that can't even spell, Africans that can't even spell Ethiopia here in this country, were burning this damn country to the ground. So don't talk to me about, oh, well, we ain't never going, we ain't got no connection to Africa. We know our history. So this is just to say that we use African Liberation Day as a vehicle for us to educate our people about the role Africa plays in our lives. And we believe that any institution that promotes the people's class war over the anti-people's class is a positive for all of humanity, because you're either in one element or you're the other. You're either a part of the people's class, as Sekou Touré articulated, or you're a part of the anti-people's class. So we are struggling to build the people's class in this world. And we view African Liberation Day and May Day as positive institutions that we can use to help us advance that concept. So, let's talk a bit, because class struggle is so complex. This is the problem that we have, right? It's such a complex phenomenon, right? But we know that despite the complexities involved with class struggle, we believe that class struggle, it as a system, the class system rather, perpetuates white supremacy. So in other words, we know that capitalism perpetuates white supremacy. Like some people will argue, well, white people have always been racist, but we're talking about institutionally having the power to oppress us. We're not talking about whether white people see us and value. I don't give a damn whether they value me or not. I don't need their validation. I don't care what they think of me. I'm not walking around the world. I hope white people accept me. I don't give a damn whether you accept us or not. Who cares? We don't need you. If you don't need us, we don't need you. If you need us, we need you. But if you don't need us, we don't give a damn about you. So that's not an issue for those of us who have our revolutionary African consciousness. We're not sitting around here worried about what white people think. We stopped doing that decades ago. So what we're saying is that we know that the capitalist system evolved to create wealth, to establish the capitalist system, rather. When I'm saying the capitalist system used the enslavement of our ancestors, rather, to create the initial wealth to build the capitalist system through industrialization. And they had to justify that process because it was built on the backs of Africa and African people. So to do that, they had to create this myth that we were inferior and that everything they were doing to colonize Africa and enslave us was for our own good. That's why you hear these idiots today. Well, slavery was not bad, but the African people like, so that's where this comes from, because these a bunch of idiots who have accepted this backward analysis of history. And the whole point of this analysis is to justify the plundering of Africa. So capitalism created white supremacy. It's not the other way around. White supremacy didn't create capitalism. Capitalism created white supremacy. So we know this because capitalism was built and is maintained on exploiting Africa. That is an important point for African people to understand, because that's why we can never be anti-white. We can never be focused on that and the nature of any people, because that's a convoluted conversation. The question is a clear one. It's a question of whose interests are represented by serving the ruling capitalist class, whose interests are represented by serving the masses of people on earth. The masses of people on earth represent the people's class. The ruling capitalist classes represent the anti-people's classes. That's the type of correct analysis that we want to develop. And there are Europeans who are part of the people's class, and there are Europeans who are part of the anti-people's class. There are Africans who are part of the people's class, and there are Africans who are a part of the anti-people's class. And this is the type of analysis that we have to understand, as Nkrumah articulates in the graph on the screen, which was listed in his book, Class Struggle in Africa. And we can never forget that we have never been able to depend upon the European working class. So even though we recognize that the problems we face are not the white man, it's the capitalist system, we also have to recognize that European people have always been used by the capitalist system against the African masses. So both things can be true and are true at the same time. So even though we're not anti-white, we're also not stupid. So we know that the overwhelming majority of European people on earth are working in the interests of the capitalist system, our enemy. We know this. So that's why we can never accept a flowery analysis of May Day and the class struggle. The only struggle is the class struggle. I know a lot of white people want to say that, and they say that all the time. And if I was them, I'd probably say it too, because it takes the pressure off of them to deal with the fact that this system was built, the capitalist system was built on white supremacy. They don't have to deal with that if they just stay in that place where the class struggle was the only struggle. They don't ever have to deal with any of that. And a lot of these people that are so-called revolutionaries that are white, they'll even say there's no such thing as white supremacy. So that's a great thing that works for them. It doesn't work for us. And so that's why we call it out, as we correctly should, that it's important to have all of these institutions. That's why we talk about May Day and African Liberation Day. We don't just talk about May Day, and we don't just talk about African Liberation Day. They both serve a very valuable purpose in terms of highlighting the worker class consciousness movement and highlighting the anti-colonial African self-determination movement. Both things are necessary. Both things are essential. Both things are things that we have to have happen for us. And any European that doesn't see the value of the self-determination anti-colonial African liberation struggle is not somebody that really stands for justice. They're just somebody that wants something for white people, and they don't really care about anybody else. So they may as well just put them in the category with the neo-Nazis and all the other white scum that exists on the planet Earth. I don't care how socialist or anarchist or whatever the hell they say they are. It doesn't matter. And any African who sees African self-determination and African anti-colonial struggle, but doesn't see the class struggle, then that's not really somebody that can help advance our people either. Because these folks are the folks who will tell you that they're for African liberation, but they're pro-capitalist, they're pro-patriarchy. There's a ton of them out here. And they can never be for African people when they're for the vestiges of the capitalist system that oppress African people. So these are important things to understand, that working class consciousness and revolutionary African personality are not contradictions. Those two things have to exist together. Any African who believes in the concept of the revolutionary African personality which is the foundation for revolutionary Pan-Africanism, you have to have a class consciousness. You absolutely have to have a class consciousness. And anybody else who says they believe in a worker class consciousness has to have a respect and support for anti-colonial struggles and the self-determination of colonized people. And if you don't have that, you're just not serious about advancing the world. And so concrete unity, a way that we can concretize, rather, the unity between the concepts of May Day and the concept of African Liberation Day. This one we want to spend a couple of moments on because it's very important, because this is something that very few people are talking about. If you go around the white left today, they're not talking about African Liberation Day. They're not talking about it at all. A few of them are, the ones that are the most progressive, but for the most part, the white left is not talking about African Liberation Day at all. And that's because they're racist to the core. There's just no other way to put it. They're racist to the core. And one of the things that you see in the movement today, and this is our perspective, we're not trying to speak for anyone else, but one of the things you see in the movement today is a lot of these white left groups, they'll adopt anti-colonial struggle to the extent that it benefits their agenda. Like you see a lot of co-optation of the Palestinian national liberation struggle from many elements of the white left today, only to the extent that it benefits their agenda and what they want to achieve. Not to the extent that they are really listening to what the masses of Palestinian people want, because the masses of Palestinian people are not talking about no two-state solution where Israel exists and there's some kind of, supposed to be some kind of separate Palestine standing next door to door with Israel. That's like saying, as an African, you're gonna live in the same duplex with the Ku Klux Klan and exist and coexist peacefully. That don't even sound right. Well, the true Palestinian liberation fighters in the world today are not talking about no two-state solution. They're talking about Palestine prior to 1948, when there was no Israel. Israel was stolen. It's Palestine, and they want that back. And so you don't hear these white left groups talking about that. You don't hear them advancing that concept. Yeah, some of them, but most of them are not advancing that. And so I would argue that a large part of the reason why you don't hear these same folks talking about African Liberation Day is because, unlike the other colonized people, we, African people, using this country for an example, we had a Black Power movement, and the other people haven't had that. You know, the indigenous people of the Western Hemisphere, you go to their events, there's all kind of Europeans there. There's all kind of Europeans talking about, I'm Indian, I'm indigenous. This is what the indigenous people need to do. And that's for the indigenous people to decide how they want to handle that. I'm not making a statement about that. That's their right to organize their movement any way they want to. But what we're saying is that the reason why you don't see white people at our stuff behaving the same way is because we had a movement in this society where we told them, get the hell out of our movement and go and organize your own people for justice. Go organize white people for justice. This still hasn't happened on a mass scale. It still hasn't happened. It still needs to happen. But my point is that that's why they're not talking about African Liberation Day, because we have not given them a space in our movement. Because like we said, we're doing this ourselves. We don't rely on them. We don't need them. Now, if they want to support us, that's great. We work with many white organizations and many white people, but they're different kind of white people than the overwhelming majority of white people who only know how to center themselves in this work. Those people that are doing that, we don't need them. We don't want anything to do with them. And they know that. That's why they don't come around. Because if they come to our events and they try to speak up, we cut them off. We're not here. This is not a space for you to go on and on with a white capitalist liberal ideology. We're not interested. We don't care. We don't want to hear it. So they don't come around because we don't center them. We don't make it about them. And my humble opinion is that other colonized people, the sooner you learn to do that, the better off you'll be also. Because these people are contributing nothing towards advancing the struggles of your people. But that's an important point. And that's why we're saying we have to talk about concrete ways to unite these two institutions, not superficial ways. And so that's what we want to talk about. So our struggle for Pan-Africanism has always been centered around a nation, class, gender analysis and practice. A nation, class, gender analysis and practice. We have never just had a class analysis where the only struggle is the class struggle. The only struggle is to unite workers. Now, the white working class, as we've said, has been racist to the core since we were kidnapped and brought to the Western Hemisphere. So how the hell are we going to say, well, the only struggle is the class struggle? We'd have to be out of our damn minds to say that, and say that all we have to do is every time in history that African people have united under this banner of the only struggle is the class struggle, we've lost. We've lost. We have not been able to rely on white people to have our backs. That's never been the reality in this society. Nobody can point to a time when that's been the mass reality in this society. So that's what we're saying, is that we've never just had just a class analysis. That's not even logical to us. It's not even logical, and it's disrespectful to our legacy as a people. We've also never had just a racial analysis, because a lot of Africans have that. You know, the only thing that matters, I support everybody Black, that kind of analysis. You know, it doesn't matter what that African is doing, because they're Black, I support them. I'm going to find some way to justify what they're doing. You know, that's not productive either. In fact, that's as reactionary as you can get, because we'll sit there, you know, I see it all the time. Africans will sit around and they'll criticize Trump supporters. Well, they don't think, those people don't have any minds. They just follow Trump. But they follow Obama the same. They act towards Obama the same way that they accuse white people acting towards Trump. I honestly don't see a difference between the two. You know, both of them exact violence and murder and destruction around the planet Earth, and the people that support both of them act like they don't even know any of that is going on. So how do you expect people like us to see a difference? Like, we don't know what you're talking about when you say, well, it's them, it's not us, or it's us, it's not them. It's the same thing. So we've never just had a racial analysis. We've always had a nation, class, gender analysis. So we can look at Mobutu, we can look at Obama, we can look at the capitalist class in blackface. We can look at the ANC, and we can look at all these contradictions, and we can create an analysis around them based on what's in the best interest of the masses of working African people on Earth. And we have always had a gender analysis as well, so that we recognize the institutional manifestations of patriarchy. There's all these people around here today who are trying to shift the blame for all the problems on the planet Earth on women and marginalized people. A lot of Africans are trying to shift blame towards LGBTQ African people. And we're here to tell you that we don't have a single problem. There is not a single problem I have as an African man in this world today that is the result of African women or any women. There is not a single problem I have in this world today that is a result of marginalized gender people. There is not a single problem that I have in this world today that is a result of African LGBTQ people or any LGBTQ people. I don't have any problems that are related to any of those people that I just named. Every goddamn problem I have on the planet Earth for my entire 61 years on this planet is connected to the backward capitalist and imperialist system. And if you're too goddamn dumb to recognize that, that's your problem. I am not confused. We are not confused about that. So that is why we have a nation, class, gender analysis. We have a scientific analysis of all three elements. So that's why we don't get caught up in all this confusion. So we encourage you, if you're African, to join the All African People's Revolutionary Party so you can develop a nation, class, gender analysis. And if you cannot join the APRP, join some other organization that has a nation, class, gender analysis, or start one that can create and develop a nation class gender analysis. And any European working class movement, whether it's socialism, anarchism, whatever it is, that movement has to have a central focus around anti-colonialism, period, dot. Anti-colonialism has to be central to that movement. Otherwise, as far we don't see any difference between you and the Ku Klux. I don't care how socialist you claim to be, anarchist you claim to be. As far as we're concerned, you're the Ku Klux Klan. You're the neo-Nazis, the Proud Boys. You're all the same to us. We don't see any difference whatsoever. In fact, I would prefer the Proud Boys and the 3%ers and neo-Nazis over you, because at least their position is clear where they stand. It's clear. It's not all this gupply gup and confusion, acting like you're my friend when it serves your agenda, but then when it doesn't serve your agenda, we can't find you anywhere. So this is important, because if European people want to gain the respect of colonized people, y'all got to get your stuff together and start creating an analysis that addresses these questions of colonialism. You have to do that, because your people are the ones who are the problem here with this question. It's not us. You're the ones who are the problem here. It's white people that support fascism, by and large. It's not majority colonized people doing that in the world today. It's not majority colonized people supporting all these fascist leaders in the world today. That's not who's doing that. It's mostly European people doing that. It's mostly European people carrying out terrorism around the planet Earth. So you got to organize your folks. That's your responsibility to do that. So that's what the European working class movement has to focus on. Stop talking about what colonized people we need to do. We didn't ask you, nor do we want to hear your advice. Nothing you've said has worked for 500 years. Why the hell would we listen to you? So stop talking to us and start talking to your own people. That's what you need to do. And then join us in continuing to build class-based anti-capitalist movements that respect anti-colonialism as the key to defining what the class struggle really should look like. The All-African People's Revolutionary Party has an anti-colonial, is a part of an anti-colonial movement that is international, that is based in Africa. This is the type of thing that has to be built all over the world. It's a class analysis. That's why we say our revolution has to be socialist. We think that the masses of working people and peasants are the people who have to create a system, who have to be in the forefront of the system of change. We say that there are three elements that create and develop revolution: the working class, the revolutionary intelligentsia, and the peasantry. And we say that everybody has to be engaged in developing those three elements of society and building our revolutionary struggle around that. So if you're a part of something and it's talking about revolution, and they're not talking about the peasantry, they're not talking about the revolutionary intelligentsia, they're not talking about the working class, they ain't talking about revolution. They ain't talking about revolution. They're probably talking about some kind of scheme to put money in their pocket, using revolutionary rhetoric to fool you into giving them your money. That's probably what they're talking about. So we close this by saying that May Day is an institution that we will continue to support, and we will continue to use it to advance the notion that a real worker struggle has to be anti-colonial. It has to be rooted in anti-colonialism. And if it's not rooted in that, it's not an anti-colonial struggle. And we add that African Liberation Day, it is a fundamental example of that anti-colonial struggle. So true working class heroes, heroines, hero people have to support African Liberation Day. If all you support is May Day and you don't know anything about African Liberation Day, then you're just another white supremacist. Or whether you can not be white, you could still support white supremacism. If you don't know anything about African Liberation Day and these types of anti-colonial self-determination institutions for colonized people. So that's what we're saying. So we commemorate May Day, we commemorate the working class struggle, and we look forward May 25th to commemorating African Liberation Day, when the two unite where we have one unified socialist Africa as a part of the objective of the African Revolution to make our contribution, as Shakur said correctly, to the worldwide communist movement. And we thank you for joining us for this session today. We really want to invite you to come back next week. It's going to be a very interesting program on May 14th. We're going to be talking about what's happening in the Sudan today. There's a lot of bourgeoisie news media outlets that are reporting about turmoil in the Sudan. So we're going to try our best to put some nation class gender analysis on what's happening in the Sudan. So join us next week for that. Take pictures for African Liberation Day 2023. You can send them in. You can send them into our website at africanliberationday.net. You see that on the screen there. You can send them to uhuruliterature@gmail.com. You don't have to wear white. Well, I don't have any white, so I can't take a picture. Just take a picture and write, even if you use a pencil, write the theme there. Write it down. Imperialism and neocolonialism must be destroyed. Africans stand ready for revolution. And you don't even have to be African. Still take a picture, because that's how you demonstrate that anti-colonial consciousness that we're talking about. So go ahead and do that and send that in. Join the All African People's Revolutionary Party. Go to the Forward Ever shop, buy several things there, continue to do that. Go to aprp-intl.org, join the party. Go to abetterworld.me, www.abetterworld.me, and donate to African Liberation Day. Thank you to all of you that are doing that. Some of you are real soldiers for justice, and we see you. We know who you are, and we know what you do, and we know what your commitment is, and we appreciate you. You're not, these criticisms aren't for you. You're doing the work, and we appreciate it. So keep that up, spread the word, support hoodcommunist.org, an outstanding resource for revolutionary African literature. Write something and submit it. Support all of the AAPRP programs that you see there. Put on your calendar to participate in the AAPRP African Liberation Day International Webcast on May 25th. We'll have more information about how you log on for that. And we have a number of commemorations on the ground throughout the world. There are even a number here in this backward cesspool empire that are happening. So if you're in California, if you're in the West Coast, we're having it in Oakland, California. There's one in Baltimore, Maryland, and we have a couple of other ones happening here in the United States. We're in Canada, we're in Europe, we're all over Africa and in the Caribbean. So participate in African Liberation Day, but if you can't go to one on the ground, the May 25th one is a webcast. You can just be in the comfort of wherever you are on your computer or your phone and participate. So plan to do that. Buy my book. Please do that. A Guide for Organized Defense Against White Supremacist, Patriarchal, and Fascist Violence. Tell people about that. Please spread the word. Tell your library to buy the book and put it in there. Whatever you can do to advance these revolutionary concepts is greatly appreciated. We thank you for joining us today. We want to ask you to have a great rest of your Sunday evening. Please join us next week. Support and join all of the AAPRP programming. Join and support all revolutionary programming. We need to do this in order to create this climate, nation, class, gender analysis, this anti-colonial struggle, this working class consciousness, the things that May Day and African Liberation Day should illustrate. You can't be pro-May Day, pro-African Liberation Day, and be pro-capitalist. You have to be for revolution. That's what those days are for. We thank you for joining us. Forward ever, backwards never.